Tête-à-tête avec un artiste.
Bonjour à toutes et tous et bienvenue pour ce tête-à-tête consacré à Billy Budd, The Story of Billy Budd Sailor, l'opéra de Oliver Lys et Ted Hoffman d'après Benjamin Britten. Nous attendons encore quelques instants puisque Finnegan Downie Dear va nous rejoindre. Ben le voilà, justement, parfait. Je vais laisser nous rejoindre et prendre place avec nous. Donc nous avons la chance aujourd'hui de nous entretenir avec plusieurs personnes, plusieurs artistes de The Story of Billy Budd Sailor. Tout d'abord Ian Rucker qui chante le rôle titre de The Story of Billy Budd. Christopher Sokolowski qui chante également le rôle du commandant Edward Fairfax Vere. Joshua Bloom qui chante le rôle de John Claggart, le terrible maître d'armes de l'Indomptable, et puis Finnegan Downie Dear, qui dirige la production de The Story of Billy Budd. Alors, je voulais d'abord vous demander peut-être de revenir un peu sur votre rapport à Billy Budd, à Billy Budd de Britten, puisque c'est un opéra du répertoire. Et je voulais vous demander comment vous avez découvert cette musique de Billy Budd. Quelle est votre relation à cette musique de Billy Budd et de Britten plus particulièrement. Donc, Britten's Billy Budd is part of the operatic repertoire. So could you tell us how do you first discover Billy Budd and what is your connection with this music and more broadly to Britten's music? I don't know who wants to begin with.
Yeah, okay. This microphone. Okay, thank you. I have a long history with Britten in the sense that was the first opera I ever saw was Turn of the Screw when I was 14 years old, and I sang in choirs, and we would sing Britten's music, and so I loved Britten from a very young age, and I've been in quite a number of Britten operas, including this one, the full version. But in different roles. And I think Finn and I disagree on this, but I think that Britten was the greatest operatic stage dramatist of the 20th century. And I think his pieces have, even if the music does not completely grab you, the drama of his work is very strong. So.
Jonathan va traduire pour nous les interventions.
Oui, Joshua connaît bien la musique de Britten. Il a joué dans Turn of the Screw quand il avait 14 ans. Il était dans les chœurs. Il a fait une autre version de Billy Budd, la version non adaptée. Et il pense que c'est peut-être le plus grand compositeur du XXe pour l'opéra, ou c'est pas exactement... Voilà. Et en ce sens, peut-être, ils ont discuté de ça avec Finnegan.
We would like to pick up on this, Finnegan.
Yeah, he is good. The first thing I ever saw actually was Peter Grimes when I was 14 with an Opera North production, and I remember that really clearly. Personally, I would go for Janacek over Britten, but I think it's quite a tight run thing. I think the thing with him is he's such a fascinating composer because when the music is he had an incredible facility, and for example, the Turn of the Screw, when you look at the manuscripts for it, as you probably know, that there are no sketches. He wrote straight from the head into the page. There's basically no corrections. And so he had an incredible facility with how he wrote music. At the same time, I think the thing about Billy Budd, which is so special, is that if I were going to criticize Britten, I'd say sometimes the music is quite facile, or sometimes it's almost too easy how he wrote it. And Billy Budd, particularly the music for Claggart, I think it is so well observed, and it's so dark and mysterious and deep, and it searches for something very dangerous and very horrifying. And I think in that piece, that's really one of the finest things that he did, particularly the Claggart music, actually.
Donc Finnegan aussi connaît cette musique depuis très jeune. 14 ans, il était dans Turn of the Screw. Il dit que s'il devait choisir, peut-être il préfère encore Janacek. Et il remarque que dans Turn of the Screw, il n'y avait pas d'esquisse. Donc Britten est quelqu'un qui écrivait cette musique très facilement, un peu comme Mozart peut-être. Et sinon, il parle de quelque chose qui est assez facile dans cette musique et à la fois mystérieux et profond.
Alors, si vous deviez raconter brièvement l'histoire de Billy Budd et nous dire un peu ce qu'elle signifie, comment est-ce que vous le feriez? Ian Rucker, could you tell us how would you tell the story of the Billy Budd Sailor, the story of Billy Budd Sailor, and how would you describe its meaning in a few words?
One thing that I think is really interesting about the story is how, and also tragic about it, is how it takes this human being who is peak innocence. You know, he wants to be there to do what he thinks he does best, and that's be a good person and do the best he can at his job. And that is to help people to just perform at the best he can with what he's able to offer. And one thing I love about this production is that it goes to show Billy Budd not only as this guy who just thinks he is just able to do whatever someone tells him, but it shows him in a little more of a raw and real light as a human being who also has to, you know, deal with the hardships of just what life has to offer.
Donc, ce qu'il y a à la fois tragique et beau dans ce personnage, donc c'est un être humain magnifique au pic de sa carrière, et il fait du mieux qu'il peut, et en même temps, donc il fait ce qu'on lui dit, il sait faire ce qu'on lui dit, mais à la fois il dépasse ça quelque part, je crois.
Alors, Finnegan Downie Dear, est-ce que vous pourriez nous dire justement cette histoire de Billy Budd, elle est adaptée, dont la musique est adaptée ici, et est-ce que vous qui connaissez la partie bien en profondeur, est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire bien, ce que cette adaptation fait finalement à l'histoire? Est-ce que cela transforme, est-ce que le sens de la musique est transformé finalement?
I mean, definitely. Like the thing is, with the thing I'd say about what we've made is that it isn't a reduction. There's this word which is quite sort of often used when you have an opera that's written for enormous forces with a big choir and with a big orchestra, like Billy Budd. And for whatever sort of necessity, whether it be financial or artistic, there is a sense whereby it is reduced for the people that you have, so that you can play it in a smaller theatre, or you can play it to a different public. And I would say that categorically, what we have done is not a reduction; it's a reimagining. You know, when particularly in the 1920s and the 1930s, after the First World War, Stravinsky started looking at all of the sort of 18th century masters like Paisiello, like Giordano, all these people. And he started sort of recomposing their music. You would never say that, for example, Pulcinella is by Paisiello. You'd say that Pulcinella is by Stravinsky. And I think in the same way that this Billy Budd we've made, it's like using the original text that Billy wrote, that Britten wrote, and using it as a sort of objet d'art, or using it as some sort of found object upon which you can base a new imagining of the themes. So I'd say it definitely is a version. And the wonderful thing about the music of Oliver Leith in general, but also with this piece, is that he has, as we discovered when we heard the piece on the instruments for the first time, it definitely does not sound like Benjamin Britten. It sounds like something quite different, and it took a day or two to get used to. But at the same time, it's an incredibly alluring aesthetic, and it's an aesthetic which is very true to him. So it is sort of using Britten as a source material, but not actually. It's just categorically not a piece by Benjamin Britten anymore. Have fun translating.
Finnegan dit que le sens de la partition est transformé. C'est le plus important peut-être. Donc ce n'est pas une réduction, et c'est quelque chose qui s'est beaucoup fait par le passé. Ça peut être pour des raisons artistiques ou financières, mais en tout cas là c'est un plus petit format, c'est vraiment réimaginé. Il prend l'exemple de Stravinsky. Quand Stravinsky recomposait des œuvres, il en fait du Stravinsky quelque part. Enfin, ça n'est plus l'œuvre d'origine dont il s'est inspiré. Donc, on peut parler d'objets trouvés. Et il mentionne donc le travail d'Oliver Leith qui a fait cette adaptation. Et il dit un peu en riant que quelque part ça sonne pas comme du Britten, et que mais que le compositeur, donc le jeune compositeur Oliver, il est fidèle à sa propre esthétique, et en ce sens, ça fonctionne.
Alors, dans cette adaptation d'Oliver Lees, justement, vous devez souvent chanter les chœurs de marins. Par exemple, au début, il y a le chœur très poignant, Oh Heave Away, ou bien le très beau chœur de consolation du novice, Come Along Kid. Et je me demandais comment est-ce que vous avez approché ce passage d'un type de vocalité à l'autre. Comment est-ce qu'on passe de ce rôle de soliste à celui de chanteur du chœur, en quelque sorte. Donc, in Oliver Lee's adaptation, you often have to sing the sailors' choruses. For example, the moving chorus, Oh Heave Away, or the beautiful chorus for the novice, Come Along Kid. And how do you approach the shift between these different vocal styles, soloist and choir? Maybe, Christopher, could you tell us something on this?
I think it gives a unique challenge for us to be able to show so many different sides of the personages that are on the stage. But on one hand, Britain does a lot of the work, and Oliver Leith does a lot of the work for us to show in the instrumentation, in the harmonic choices that Oliver took and that Britain takes anyways. There's a lot of the character already in the vocal lines as it is. I would say for Captain Vere, it was a unique challenge because it requires very different temperaments of vocality, very different, in some ways, age of vocality. In the beginning, in the final scene, where we're seeing him in some abstract way as an old man. Not to say you have to sing it in this way, but there's a certain fatigue that has to be heard in the voice to show a journey of a man who has suffered his life with a decision that he didn't want to make. So showing this vulnerability in these extremely difficult first and last scenes, and then flipping very quickly to a younger, a Vere with more vitality in the voice. The music does a lot of the work for you. And also with how Oliver really kind of masterfully, especially these first and last scenes, was able to create this soundscape for all of these characterizations to kind of flourish. I would say it's actually not so much of a challenge. Even going between Captain Vere and the choir and Squeak, the music is in the participation of all of us and how everything comes together. A lot of these qualities are magnified on each other like a kaleidoscope, which makes it really a pleasure to do, actually, to take on all of these different roles as well.
Donc voilà, le fait de passer de ces chants de marin du chœur au rôle de capitaine, ben, c'est un challenge, oui et non. Britain et Oliver Leith aident en fait. C'est dans l'écriture déjà ce différent caractère. Et donc quand il est Captain Vere, c'est quelqu'un d'un certain âge avec un tempérament, une autorité. Et au contraire, quand c'est un jeune marin, ben, il y a cette vigueur, tout ça. Et donc c'est comme un peu un kaléidoscope de voilà, différentes qualités d'interprétation. Et il prend un certain plaisir à interpréter ça.
Dans cette production, donc Christopher et Joshua, vous devez souvent donc chanter plusieurs personnages, outre ces chœurs de marins. Et Christopher, vous chantez également le personnage de Squeak. Et Joshua, vous chantez aussi celui de Dansker. Et comment se passe ce changement d'un personnage à l'autre, vocalement et puis scéniquement? Est-ce que c'est difficile finalement? In this production, are you saying that both of you perform multiple roles? And maybe, Joshua, could you tell us something on the way you can portray Dansker also, because there is, of course, the character of Claggart, but there is also Dansker. How do you manage the transition from one character to another?
Well, it's actually a real gift of a thing as an actor to be given multiple characters in one show, and I find it's very exciting and I enjoy it. Of course, there's the very practical element of changing from one costume to another and putting on a fake facial hair that's something that took a little rehearsing. For me, going from and you have in the characters of Claggart and Dansker two polar opposites. You have the Claggart who is a very destructive force on board the boat and wants to ensure that Billy Budd is killed, and you have Dansker, who is possibly his most sincere friend and confidant on the ship. So to go from one to the other is in a sense it's easy because it's a very big shift. If the characters were more similar, it would be more difficult. But actually to go from someone who is has a certain sort of Claggart is a very strong and powerful force. Dansker less so. Dansker is an old man. He's not capable of doing the things he once could do, and there's a sort of a world weariness about him, which and a kindness, there's a gentleness to him, which is very different to Claggart. So it was actually, I found it very enjoyable. Yeah.
Donc, ces deux rôles que Joshua doit interpréter, donc Claggart c'est un homme fort, destructeur, qui veut tuer Billy Budd, et Dansker au contraire qui est son meilleur ami, donc qui est quelqu'un de vieux, on a une certaine pitié, on le trouve gentil, et donc ce sont des rôles tellement diamétralement opposés que c'est assez facile. Et au début, il disait que finalement, pour un acteur, c'est un plaisir, c'est un cadeau justement de changer de costume, changer de coupe de cheveux et d'être quelqu'un d'autre.
Non. Christopher, vous changez également d'un personnage à l'autre, deux personnages très opposés. Est-ce que vous voulez revenir aussi sur cette transition? You play two very different characters, so could you tell us about this shift between the characters?
It's quite a unique shift, but on one hand it gives, just as you said, a good contrast of how to play in the story, because Captain Vere obviously is the character who is posed with the dilemma of what to do with the crime that Billy has committed, and while he very clearly wants to pardon him and give him a second chance, Squeak, on the other hand, is the one who tries to sabotage him in the first place. So from my character's journey, I'm going from the character who puts him in that very position to the one that then has to reconcile with the fate. So it's a very unique and a very interesting way to look at these two characters that come from directly opposite positions to put him and to try to save him from the same exact position, which I think psychologically is a very interesting thing to do with this production. I think probably would only ever work in this production as well. But yet, from a psychological perspective, it's a very interesting way to play these exact foils of each other. They're exact opposites. They play precisely the opposite role, which is very interesting. Yeah.
Donc c'est encore une histoire de rôles absolument diamétralement opposés. Donc Captain Vere qui doit juger Billy Budd, ce qu'il faut faire, il se demande comment, mais qui en fait qui n'a pas envie de le tuer, alors que Squeak au contraire c'est lui qui commence le sabotage au début. Donc voilà, encore ce jeu des opposés.
Alors il y a une question que j'aimerais d'abord poser à Ian Rucker ou également mais j'aimerais avoir ensuite l'avis de Finnegan en deuxième parce qu'il s'agit de la question du placement finalement de la direction musicale des instruments derrière à l'arrière de la scène. Donc comment est-ce que l'on fait pour parce qu'il y a évidemment le travail où c'est possible d'interagir entre l'arrière de la scène et le devant, mais lorsqu'il s'agit de jouer, vous tournez dos finalement à la direction musicale, et donc je me demandais comment est-ce qu'on fait. It's a very practical question because Finnegan is conducting from the keyboard and he is positioned behind you. So could you tell us how this configuration has changed usual working habits, maybe? But maybe just for the singers, please.
You weren't invited.
Well, it's quite interesting, and there's something I've been wanting to kind of comment on when talking about Dansker and Claggart and Squeak and Captain Vere, and having all the musicians behind us. I feel like what it was difficult to work around the different, let's say, configuration of the stage, but we were able to get help with video monitors kind of placed all around the theater. Like when you go, you'll see one back there, one over here, one over there, one behind the wall, one on the other side of the wall. But I think what all of this really aids in is telling a really raw version of the story, because not only are the musicians playing the music, but they're also playing characters. You see Finn being one of the sailors that's first pressed, and then the percussionist being another. And we're all part of this story. And even when I'm singing chorus, not playing Billy, or we're not being characters, we are still parts of the story, telling a version of this that the version that Britain wrote, the big grand stage production, sometimes doesn't get to the point of, so this is to be a part of a very reduced yet meaningful version of the story is quite fun, actually.
Donc, il trouve ça très intéressant, voilà, de cette configuration très spéciale avec beaucoup moins d'acteurs, beaucoup moins de musiciens et les musiciens derrière. Donc c'est vraiment pas comme d'habitude. C'est une configuration de la scène très spéciale. Apparemment, il y a des écrans de tous les côtés pour montrer Finnegan, le chef. Et voilà, c'est intéressant d'avoir tout le monde qui joue un peu tout, le percussionniste qui a un moment un personnage, le soliste qui devient choriste. Et apparemment, c'est... même si, voilà, c'est une réduction, mais ça donne quelque chose de très unique, de très spécial.
It will be nice thing, don't worry. I think the thing that I'm really proud of in this is that because there wasn't this traditional means of communication between conducting and the singers, it meant that the singers had to take an unusual amount of responsibility in terms of particularly rhythm, and so many times I said to all the singers, like, here, you must be responsible for the pulse, like the pulse is in you and you must, the rhythm of the scene must come from you. And it's amazing how they have responded to this huge challenge, because so much of singing is about getting rid of this sense of each syllable happening one after the other and trying to tell a story through a phrase or tell a story through a word. And I've been really amazed by how well all the singers have really been able to be that sort of fixed rhythmic point that we can all grip onto in the aid of creating the production where, as Ian said, like all the best productions, they make a world of the stage, that the stage becomes a world, and as an audience you enter into the spirit and the space of that world. And I think that the incredible thing about this show is that we do all feel like we are on the same ship, like we're in the same playing space. And from how I hope it comes across, the audience is also welcome into that space. And that, of course, there are challenges in terms of the connection, but actually it's been a completely fulfilling experience, partly because the singers of this production are so unusually musically gifted and strong.
Donc Finnegan nous explique voilà, que ce sont vraiment pas les moyens traditionnels. Ce qui se passe, c'est chaque chanteur devient responsable, autonome de sa propre pulsation, vu qu'il n'a pas le chef d'orchestre dans ses yeux devant quand il regarde le public. Il est obligé de s'autonomiser un petit peu, et ce n'est plus chaque syllabe qui tombe sur chaque temps, mais apparemment quelque chose d'un peu différent. Et il dit qu'on est tous sur le même bateau. L'espace scénique est donc comme un monde dans lequel les auditeurs sont invités à rentrer. Et enfin, il dit que tous les chanteurs sont incroyablement doués.
Une réaction, justement.
Well, first of all, I say that Finn, the money I will pay you later for those comments. Basically everything he said, but in addition to that, I mean, obviously there are big challenges to performing the way we are doing in this production, but also I think it's very liberating in an intimate space like the Jeu de Paume, where you don't, first of all, there's no necessity to face the front, whereas in a big theatre with a big orchestra, it's essential that you sing to the audience, otherwise you don't get heard over the orchestra. In this particular setting, because the theatre is so small, because the instrumentation is much less, we can deliver lines upstage and to the side and be much more naturalistic about the acting than you would in a bigger production. So I think
Donc c'est à la fois difficile mais tout à fait unique d'être dans cette production. Et il parle du jeu de paume en disant que parce que c'est un théâtre si petit, finalement il n'y a pas besoin, comme dans un espace plus grand, de vraiment de regarder vers le public. Et en ce sens, il peut jouer de manière plus naturaliste, voilà, sur les côtés.
Oui, justement, puisqu'on parle de ce théâtre et de la manière d'y jouer, Ted Hoffman expliquait l'autre jour qu'il cherche un travail de plateau très horizontal pour trouver une grande vérité dans les interactions entre les personnages, justement. Alors c'est favorisé par cette fluidité, évidemment, dans le travail, mais aussi, j'imagine, par le travail qui vous a fait faire, disons, d'interaction entre les personnages. So I was saying that Ted Hoffman explained that he was aiming for a horizontal approach on stage. He brings out a deeper truth in the interactions between characters this way. And could you describe how he worked with you to achieve that? Maybe Christopher.
The aesthetic, and I had a lot of conversations with Ted about this, because I think as an actor it's very important to understand the world you're living in, and also in some ways the guidelines by which you are allowed to express. And every director has a very different way of what type of expression they are wanting to reach to the audience. And this horizontality, this I would say a facade of two-dimension in an extremely dimensional world is a really interesting challenge of how to show an extremely emotional and deep opera. And my challenge from the beginning with him was also never to allow the expression of a moment to cross a certain point where you are no longer inviting the audience to you, you are going to them. And he really loves the interaction of displaying a scene, displaying a relationship, an interaction, a moment, an emotion in a way that pulls the audience to see as much of themselves or the world in that interaction as they wish, or as they are capable of, or as they are open to. And I think that was, in the end, one of the most rewarding things about how this production came together, that we give really a really vibrant skeleton of an extremely emotional story that allows everyone to kind of see every aspect of themselves in the way the story is being told. And I think that's a really unique language of theater. It was a big challenge to get to a way to make that feel natural, but a really cool one, yeah.
Donc il y a eu beaucoup de discussions d'ordre esthétique avec le metteur en scène, Ted Hoffman, discussions pour comprendre finalement ses intentions du metteur en scène, et il dit donc, comment dire, toujours éviter d'être dans un rôle où finalement le spectateur ne peut pas comprendre ou s'y retrouver lui-même. Et donc l'idée, c'est peut-être de présenter le squelette d'une histoire dans laquelle chacun y met du sien, s'y retrouve.
Yann.
Something that's very interesting about opera itself as a whole is it's most times almost surreal, almost a heightened space above what the true human emotion is. And I think what has been so incredible about this production is it takes, and is thinking in that horizontal plane, it takes everything back down to earth. And like I said earlier, it makes everything feel a little more real and more humanistic. And opera itself, and theater, a lot of grand theater in general, it does come from that place of true human emotion. But what this production does in this horizontal space is take it down to a little more of a centered space, So you're not going to be sitting in the audience, 30 feet away, all, like being like, wow, this person is singing so loud, so grand, and the orchestra is fantastic and big, and like that's a great thing in itself. But having this production where it does, the whole jeu de paume is with you. You feel like everyone is next to you, everyone's listening, everyone is feeling what you are feeling as not a character, but as yourself and a human being. Same with everyone in the cast. You're giving raw emotion, and I think that's been beautiful.
Donc il trouve intéressant, mais que disons dans l'opéra peut-être plus traditionnel, cet aspect surréel, peut-être distant, qui n'est justement pas là dans cette production, dans un théâtre plus intime, et ça rend l'histoire plus vraie, et donc c'est peut-être plus centré. Il parle d'une raw emotion, d'une émotion crue.
Oui, alors justement, dans cette horizontalité qui est recherchée dans les interactions, quelque chose d'assez réaliste, il y a également, pour favoriser cette horizontalité, il y a parfois ces choses très où on croit vraiment fortement finalement aux relations que l'on voit sur scène, et puis il y a des effets parfois de distanciation. Il y a le théâtre qu'on voit, et puis il y a aussi le fait que les musiciens viennent justement chanter. Vous le mentionniez un peu avant. Peut-être, est-ce que Finnegan, vous pourriez nous dire comment vous en avez fait l'expérience, parce que devoir vite quitter la direction, le piano, aller chanter un rôle et ensuite revenir au clavier.
Well, like Chris already said, we've all done things in this production that we wouldn't usually do, it's been a long-time dream of mine to be beaten up by Josh Bloom on stage. And so we have this very intimate scene where Josh hits me in the stomach. But it's funny because in a sense it's such a wonderful piece of theatre making by Ted, not because of my singing, but because of the fact that you do really realise that this sort of traditional hierarchy of the conductor sitting outside of the playing space as you see the conductor on stage, and you realise that there is a flattening of this sort of traditional operatic hierarchy, which is really a very a worthy cause to get hit by Josh in aid of.
Just la traduction.
Donc ils ont attendu ce moment depuis longtemps. Ils ont parlé encore de cette horizontalité, le fait que le chef est un coup un chanteur, un coup dirige, et peut-être je ne vais pas vous interrompre.
However, I must say that off stage, Finn does get his own back.
Maybe could you repeat one?
Finn gets his revenge off stage.
La revanche dans les coulisses.
Alors,
de Finnegan.
Alors justement, on parle de la psychologie de ces personnages et peut-être qu'ils débordent sur le réel parfois, mais si on reprend, disons, la psychologie de ces personnages et leur vocalité spécifique, j'aimerais bien qu'on revienne un peu sur la manière dont vous abordez ces personnages. Peut-être Ian Rucker en premier, je pense notamment à la prière de Billy Budd, qui est un moment particulièrement magique. Comment est-ce que vous en pensez l'interprétation, notamment? Comment vous incarnez ce personnage? Et puis comment vous voyez l'interprétation? I was saying, how do you approach the psychology of your character and the specific vocal qualities needed to sing it? And I was thinking about Beethoven's final prayer, which is a particular magical moment. So how do you think about interpreting it?
I think it truly, being in the jeu de paume has made it much easier to really sing with the full emotion of mostly at the end, because I mean, when you are it's difficult because you want to make it as real as possible, and like as an actor, I can't say that I've ever had this experience, so it's how do I do it? It's mostly just based on truly living with the text of the piece and letting it affect you, and letting that fuel the vocal intensity. And you think sitting in, when you've been sitting in a space by yourself, when you're going through maybe a really difficult time, or you're having a really, you just going through it, letting that past experience influence you, and letting that speak through in your voice, instead of making it something that seems artificial. And I think that kind of goes back to what we've all been saying, is like the true raw emotion of it all. And I think that's our job as actors, is not to make it artificial, but to find examples of things that you have experienced throughout your life, and letting that influence you in your voice and your art.
Donc on parle de cette prière, et il dit que ça se prêtait assez bien à ce théâtre. C'était pour lui presque c'était facile dans cet endroit. Donc il s'agit de rendre vrai cette histoire. Donc comment faire, il se laisse finalement guider par le texte qu'il a à dire, et il associe ça à des moments de sa propre vie personnelle, et de manière à ce que le texte se reflète, et ses émotions se reflètent dans sa voix. Et quelque part, c'est donc son rôle d'acteur de rendre tout ça authentique.
And what's interesting about the jeu de paume is that I'm able to try things that I couldn't do at a place like Chicago, where I'm from, because Chicago, where I've studied, the theater is ginormous. So I'm truly not able to find the soft textures that I can in a place like Jeu de Paume that only seats a few hundred. So being in a space where I can try things and truly let my heart sing rather than my lungs and my volume, I think is really special.
Donc il vient de Chicago, et là-bas le théâtre est énorme, et c'est pas du tout apparemment la même vocalité qui en ressort. Il parle de texture délicate, d'essayer des choses avec sa voix, et que ça a été seulement possible ici.
Oui, alors Christopher Sokolowski, est-ce que vous pourriez nous dire justement, pour ce personnage qui est rongé par la culpabilité, pour le coup, comment est-ce que vous l'incarnez vocalement? Comment est-ce que vous y êtes pris pour incarner ce personnage d'Edward Fairfax Vere? Could you tell us how you approach the character of Edward Fairfax Vere, who is tormented by guilt, particularly in the beginning and the end of the opera, with this incredible moment?
It's a very unique character that shows so much of a journey, and for me to kind of get into the psychology of this character, I as the actor just need to believe every scene that I'm in. I need to understand the purpose of the scene. I need to understand the trajectory and the roadmap of the whole piece. Also, as something as simple as the abstract way of me saying I am an old man when I'm 33 years old, wearing all white with no wig, no makeup. I need to be able to understand what I mean when I say that. Because if I don't understand what I'm trying to say with this, it communicates nothing. It's not enough to say I am an old man now. So for me, also at my age, taking this role, which is a role that oftentimes will be given to an older tenor, for whatever reason, because in reality the beginning and the end are the only moments when he is an old man. In the story he could be as young as I am. Oftentimes there were captains, especially in times of crisis, that were in their 20s, for sure in their 30s. But in this particular production, for me to kind of understand the psychological aspect of it and how to carry the psychological burden of what he brings, and also to start in the first 3 minutes of the opera to already be in that moment, which is a big challenge. For me to justify it here, it was the idea of experiencing a trauma which we all experience in our lives in small or big ways, and the classic emotion of recognizing a trauma and how you can say in a split second it has aged you so much. So even if I'm not there in full makeup and wearing an old jacket and slunched over in a chair to show age, I can simply convert that aesthetic of heaviness and put it into the idea of the lived trauma, even when the captain at 33 years of age has to sentence an innocent man to death, how that can so quickly make you look at the world differently. You realize the world is not a safe place. You realize people die every second. You realize people make bad decisions every second, and how he takes psychologically that weight onto his own shoulders, and it ages him like this, which I really try to show also in the death of Claggart. There's a moment where he's carried off stage, and in this moment I take that for my character's position to stare at where his body was laying and to look empty into this and to feel age come into him, feel oldness, feel a weariness enter his body, even in the middle of the opera. You see, this was for me a big turning point to show where he is just, embraces a fatigue that he then carries to the end of his life.
Donc ça a été un voyage difficile d'être dans ce caractère d'un homme âgé, de comment sentir cette fatigue, entre autres. Et donc il dit qu'à travers chaque scène, il a appris à comprendre le rôle. Et voilà, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, comment il doit se sentir, comment il doit jouer quand il dit « je suis maintenant cet homme vieux, âgé ». Donc dans la psychologie du personnage, donc, dès le début, donc, il y a cet aspect où il va donner la mort à Billy Budd, donc il y a déjà ce remords, il y a déjà cet âge, toutes ces choses atroces qui vont lui arriver dans l'âge avancé. Et voilà.
Just listening to Chris there, actually, I hadn't realised what, of course, because I've never actually seen the show because I'm behind it, but what a sort of quietly incredible thing it is for you to come on stage and say, I am an old man now. And actually you think of this, that really is the magic of theatre, in the same way that sort of Oberon can come on stage and say, I am invisible, and the audience goes, oh yeah, he's invisible, we understand the scene. And actually it is amazing how you say that, and the whole show is filled with this sort of very quiet but very powerful theatricality, which actually you don't associate, because of the subject matter, you don't associate with the original opera. And actually what Ted has done so extraordinarily well is create this sort of theatricality where someone who is 33 can come on stage, and through the power of the music and the simplicity of it, he says, I am an old man, and the audience believes that he is immediately an old man. Or Josh can be a terrible, evil person, and then 5 seconds later can be the same person who sort of not sentenced him to death but wants to kill him, can be his closest confidant. And actually there are all these doublings in the opera that I really do think this version of it has really brought forward through the sort of intrinsic power of what theatre can do. And that's, again, testament to these people.
Il y a des choses qu'il réalise. Donc, il dit qu'il n'a jamais vraiment vu le spectacle devant, vu qu'il est derrière avec les musiciens. Et il parle finalement de la magie du théâtre de façon assez globale. Il parle de cette réplique à un moment où il dit qu'il est invisible, et il revient sur Joshua qui peut avoir deux rôles complètement opposés.
Joshua Bloom, could you just tell us about the way you approach this frightening character of John Claggart?
It's lovely to play the baddie. It's quite fun. What I tried to do with him, I don't know how successful I am, but what I see in his character as opposed to Billy Budd's character is that Billy Budd is very straightforward. He's direct. He takes everything at face value. He's ingenuous in that way, whereas Claggart is the opposite of that. And what I found intriguing and hope to do is find the different colours for him, depending on what situation he's in. So with the officers and with Captain Vere, he's very sycophantic and self-deprecating. With his subordinates, he is cruel and violent. And when he is by himself, there is another sort of colour of sort of a certain self-awareness, and hopefully I've managed to create some ugly sounds which are intentional, and some other sounds which hopefully are not quite so ugly. So, yeah.
So vocally, this approach is a way you have to work to find a way to describe this cruelty in what you're.
I think that, you know, because I think we all are actors. Everyone in life is an actor. We will behave differently towards our boss than we would to our friends or to children. We speak differently. We have different ways of communicating. I think this is human nature, and I think that to take a character and show that to the audience, that, you know, when he is around certain people, he behaves in such a way, and when he is with others, he behaves differently. I think this is something we all do, and I think it's kind of a fascinating process to attempt. Yeah.
Donc, il trouve que c'est très drôle de jouer le rôle du méchant. Et il dit que, en un sens, il est très différent de Billy, qui est clair, qui n'est pas un personnage ambigu, qui est peut-être ingénu. Lui, au contraire, est à la fois autodestructeur, cruel, donc avec son équipage, mais en même temps conscient de tout ça. Et il dit que il doit parfois faire volontairement des sons moches avec sa voix, avoir provoqué le sentiment de répulsion presque. Et il dit après qu'on est tous acteurs quelque part, qu'on ne parle jamais à son patron comme à ses amis, ni comme aux enfants, et que c'est la nature humaine, et que c'est justement très intéressant dans le théâtre de montrer ça au public.
Bien, merci beaucoup à vous d'avoir répondu à toutes ces questions. Joshua Bloom, Christopher Sokolowski, Ian Rucker, Finnegan Downie Dear. Merci beaucoup. À présent, je laisse la parole au public. S'il y a des questions dans l'Assemblée, des gens qui voudraient poser des questions au chanteur et au directeur musical de cette production de The Story of Billy Budd Sailor. Je laisse la parole circuler à présent. Alors, la première question. Oui, monsieur.
Pas aborder le contexte sentimental caché. Pardon. Vous n'avez pas abordé le contexte sentimental caché que tout le monde connaît. Hein. Non, là, on n'en a pas parlé. Qu'en est-il? Comment vous concevez l'approche de les rapports humains entre les différents protagonistes, puisqu'il y a quand même un arrière-sens. Hein.
The question is about the queer context of Billy Budd Sailor that we not yet introduced. So maybe could you, Ian Rucker, answer to this question of how did you approach this aspect of the character?
I feel like it's truly not so intense as, you know, as it really maybe played out to be. I truly think, you know, when you are, it's more about human connection, you know, and with where we are at, you know, on a boat with all men, it doesn't, like, I think you're just going to find that you find connections with people, and that can turn into something that is truly beautiful, and just kind of allowing it to go there.
Another question, une autre question, peut-être dans. Ouais. Oh, pardon.
Il dit qu'il n'y a peut-être pas autant ce n'est pas aussi intense que ça, et que c'est finalement une question de rencontre humaine.
I will follow up with that, which is that I think there are the three roles of Bud in the centre, and then these two older characters, not necessarily older, but probably, of Claggart and Vere. And there is very much a sense of different relationships which may or may not be homosexual towards Bud as this young, pure soul. And I do think that certainly, have you seen the show? Not yet. Do you know the opera, the original? Okay. I would be very. But I've got no. It's not an accusation. But it's. I think it is a very different thing. And in this show, certainly Ted has made a few decisions about how the nature of those relationships transpires. And I would just say, well, bear with me. Yeah. Yes, of course. For sure. But all I would say is that that is Billy Budd by Benjamin Britten, and we are doing Billy Budd by Oliver Leith. And it is it's a very different take on the same material. And the relationships, you will see the prism in which they are seen in a slightly different light, for sure.
Donc il y a ces trois caractères, Budd, Claggart et Vere. Donc peut-être il y a la façon dont finalement Claggart et Vere regardent Billy Budd. C'est peut-être encore quelque chose d'autre que Billy Budd lui-même quand il en parle. Et donc on sait, c'est peut-être assez ambigu où se trouvent les rapports ici, la nature de ces relations, l'homosexualité et tout ça. Et peut-être, il y a le fait que, oui, Billy Budd par Britten, c'est pas la même chose que Britten par Oliver Leith, et qu'il a, oui, le sens est un peu changé, peut-être.
Bien, y a-t-il d'autres questions? Bien, je crois alors qu'on peut applaudir nos quatre... Ah, peut-être simplement, encore une réaction. Excusez-moi, more on this point.
I think this is an important question. I would like to make a bit more on that as well. I think it's very easy to take this opera, which, like all of Benjamin Britten's operas, does have this kind of layer of queer culture to it, but it's always done in a very English way, a very reserved way, a very withheld way. And I think what Ted really wanted to zoom in on is the validity of these queer connections in the opera and these queer relationships. So it's quite easy to take Billy Budd and present it in a way that is in a very, and maybe I'm being too outspoken to say, in a very English way to hide these qualities. But I think very conversely, Ted wanted to zoom in on these and show precisely the emotion that is underneath the relationships in these characters between Claggart and Billy, truly almost sharing an extremely intimate moment, which in some ways is the entire reason why he wants to destroy him, because he opens up something in his character that is way too vulnerable. Mm-hmm. In Captain Vere, so we always try to find these moments to say what in the relationship of these characters could have gone in a romantic direction in this moment, and we try to dive in at that precise moment. Yeah. To, I think, give Britten's work an even more 2025 contemporary way of exploring the realness of queer love and of queer attraction. And I think he explored that in all of his pieces. That was really, for his time, he was a pioneer of exploration of queer culture in staged art in England, for sure. And we try to maximize that, I think. I hope. Absolutely.
Donc, il rappelle que Britten, il y a toujours cette dimension et que Britten est anglais, donc il y a cette dimension de queerness, mais qui est cachée, une certaine pudeur face à ça. Et voilà, il parle donc du personnage de Billy Budd qui finalement se montre très vulnérable et plonge dans ce drame. Ça aurait pu aller ailleurs, mais ça bascule comme ça, le sens de la pièce.
And I think that what Chris said, it's extraordinary. But actually, in making the queerness more explicit, actually, the sensation that I have of the whole piece, as someone who knows the original, is that the result is more general. It seems like that it's more that the actual output of what we have from making these relationships very explicitly queer is that the thing that you take away is a much more, not every day, but like it seems much more normalized. Exactly. It's really extraordinary in that rather than hiding behind this veneer of sort of British, maybe shame would be one word, but certainly ambiguity, I would say, making the issue much more transparent and much more direct has the result that it's a completely different. That's why I say it's a different piece for that. Absolutely.
En rendant cet aspect donc plus explicite quelque part, le résultat est plus général, plus normalisé. Et si je comprends, là au contraire, en étant moins explicite, l'effet est peut-être plus réussi.
Bien, merci beaucoup. Alors, pour ces réponses à l'ensemble des questions que je vous ai posées et que l'assistance vous a également posées, donc je pense qu'on peut quand même applaudir. Merci. Alors, vous pourrez les voir et les entendre demain encore dans Billy Budd pour les 2 dernières représentations qui ont lieu dans l'après-midi et dans la soirée. Je vous donne rendez-vous pour le prochain Tête-à-Tête demain avec Sophie Coche et Nicolas Courjal qui interprètent les rôles de la mère et du père dans Louise de Charpentier, dans la production de Louise de Charpentier. Voilà. Je vous souhaite une excellente soirée à tous.
Excuse-moi François, je te coupe la parole. Vous pourrez retrouver aussi, donc il reste des places pour demain encore pour les 2 représentations de Billy Budd. Vous pouvez en acheter dans l'après-midi. Et vous pourrez retrouver Ted Huffman en tête-à-tête aussi à 18h le 11 pour la suite du casting de cette production. Merci.